MP Dianne Kohler Barnard speaking to me on this very show at around about this time yesterday, in fact, on Newsday. We've been talking about Johan Booysen. Let's talk to Johan Booysen now. My colleague Xoli Mngambi is with him in Centurion. Xoli, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Gareth. And of course, as you've introduced him, I need not introduce him. But perhaps it's worth a mention to say that he is now involved in the private security industry. And he's happy for us to tell the public that he now is the national head of investigations within the Fidelity Group. And let's talk to Mr. Booysen. Mr. Booysen, thank you very much for giving us your time. I want to start off this conversation this way. How seriously do you take the threats of a hit against you?
Xoli, I would like to repeat what Mr. Mtune said the other night on Radio 702. You only have one life. I don't have a second one to second guess. So I do regard the threats as serious.
Why do you take them seriously? Is it because of the people from which they come? People who've informed you of these threats against you, or is it something else that you believe could be linked to these?
Well, let me put it this way. I would like to believe that it's not true. But given the history of what's happened to me over the last 6 years, since I started very sensitive investigations in KwaZulu-Natal, which links certain politicians, which links up to very senior police officials and also well-connected businessmen. I mean, I've been arrested on 2 occasions. I've been, in spite of the fact that the High Court in KwaZulu-Natal had ruled that there is no evidence against me, the current NDPP, Shaun Abrams, once again authorized my prosecution. If you look at all the protagonists that I had been dealing with over the last 6 years, and they are all heavyweights in a number of government institutions, and we talk about politicians, and looking at the climate in KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of politicians that had actually been murdered.
Mr. Booysen, you say that you have 4 impeccable sources that have brought this information to you. The question I want to ask you then is, when did you first learn of these threats against you, and how fresh is the latest tip-off?
Only about a month ago it was brought to my attention, and at the beginning I was quite skeptical, because from time to time you get these rumors, or you get information that someone is planning to do you harm. So in the beginning I was quite skeptical about it, but subsequently, about a week or 2 after that, I was approached by another source, and he actually phoned me, and I was busy in a meeting, and this person kept on, appeared to be quite frantic to speak to me, and I kept on cutting his calls because I was busy in a meeting, and eventually sent him a message, phone me urgently. And I actually excused myself from the meeting, and then I phoned this person, and he said to me, get another phone to phone me on. So we communicated on different numbers. And he informed me at the time that there had been a meeting in KwaZulu-Natal where the discussion took place, inter alia, that I should be eliminated.
And so these are people that you believe are honest and credible people. Let me put that to you first of all.
Well, the first person who alerted me to a possible threat, there's no question whatsoever as to his credibility and his integrity. And it's very unfortunate that I am not in a position to divulge the identity of that person. When the second person who made contact with me, he's a trusted person that I've been dealing with for a number of years, and I have no reason to not believe him making contact with me, and also the anxiety displayed at the time to get hold of me at the time. To me is a clear indication that there's indeed something brewing.
Are any of your sources within the police?
The one source, there are actually 4 sources. One of the sources is a member of the South African Police Service, and he is with crime intelligence in KwaZulu-Natal.
Here's an important question I want to ask of you, Mr. Booysen. Have you asked these sources, have you asked these people, why such high-profile people like the former president, Jacob Zuma, very senior KZN ANC officials, and a former board chairperson of SAA would want to have you eliminated? Because I imagine that would be a very important conversation.
It's indeed a question that I'm asking. And when I speak to the sources, all we can do at this juncture is to speculate as to what a possible motive could be. And then the conclusion that we all come to is you have to look at what's happened in the last 6 years. There are a number of protagonists, and I've mentioned it in a book that I co-wrote with a respected journalist, Jessica Pitchford. I've mentioned it, and it's in the public domain. Investigations that I had been involved with implicates certain, well, at the time, a police minister at the time. And that is, and what I'm saying now, it's not a secret. It's been well documented in the media. At the time, the fence that was built around the house of the then police minister, Nathi Mtetwa, where they used the slush fund. One of the investigators that had been involved in the investigation into the slush fund, Brigadier Simon Madonsela at the time, who also subsequently had been ostracized by the police, by the way. Madonsela actually came to myself for assistance in that particular investigation. If you look at the fact that we had someone like Nkobo Jiba, who was the acting head of the prosecuting authority at the time, who authorized my prosecution, whereas there was no evidence. The court held that there was no evidence. And subsequent, as part of that litigation, she actually lied under oath. And as we speak, she and another advocate who incidentally had also been involved at the time in that investigation to try and thwart the investigation. The two of them have both now been disbarred.
This is what I want to get on the record, Mr. Booysen. Your sources, what did they say to you specifically were the names of the people who were involved in hiring hitmen to have you eliminated? Could you give us the names of the people that have been given to you as those that want to have you killed?
I see on social media that they accused Dianne Kohler Barnard of being a coward because she abused her
parliamentary privilege.
So I don't know how much privilege I have in this instance, but what I'm prepared to say is I can confirm that what she said in Parliament are indeed the individuals that are, the names that she mentioned in Parliament are indeed the same individuals that the sources have told me were part of this conspiracy.
Are you involved in any investigative work currently that could have links to these people who allegedly want to have you killed?
Yes. Although I'm in the private sector and although I'm working for a private company, what you should not lose sight of is the fact that I remain a very critical witness in a lot of those investigations that I had done that I think eventually resulted in myself becoming a target. For instance, if you look at the provincial commissioner at the time who is now suspended, Mamonye Nkobeni, I'm a witness in that particular matter. Should there be an inquiry into her fitness, because I understand she's recently lost her matter in the Supreme Court of Appeal. I'm a witness in the investigation against Tosh and Pandey, who's business associate of Edward Zuma, the president's son, and who's also a business associate of Dibo Mzobe, who's also a family member of the state president. And over and above that, I am still collaborating with the executive director of IPID, Mr. Robert McBride, in sensitive investigations. We know that, and I think it's common cause that the previous national head of the Hawks, Binning and Tlametsa, as we speak, I do have information that they are definitely not resting on their laurels. And then you need to join the dots. If you talk about Jiba, you talk about Richard Ndluli, you talk about a couple of years ago we had the so-called ground coverage document that was leaked, well not leaked, it was actually given to the then state president by Richard Ndluli. Now the ground coverage document we all now know has been discredited. I think at the time Mr. Tokyo Segwale said it's a load of rubbish. So if you look in this whole thing in totality, there are many protagonists, all with the same agenda and reservations. So it could be anyone's guess who is really behind this thing.
Just as a final question to you, Mr. Booysen, there's a lot of killings that are currently taking place in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That province, you were head of the Hawks there for a very long time. First of all, what do you make of those killings that are happening there? In particular, the people who seem to be eliminated are politicians, and not just mere mortals, or not just people who are nobodies. They are senior leaders in the ANC. What do you believe is driving them?
Todd, as far as I'm concerned, there's one thing that drives a lot of these problems, and it's called greed. Now, a number of these politicians, and I'd been involved with a number of these investigations prior to me leaving the police and now been in the private industry. I had investigators working with me over the years. The same Brigadier Simon Marunzela, there's a guy by the name of Zungu. Excellent investigators. And by the way, during my tenure, and I'm not saying it, you can go and establish for yourself by researching the statistics. At the time, we solved most of those cases. And not through my good work, but through the people that worked with me. But invariably, if you go back, 90% of the time links up with corruption, tenders. Let me give you an example. We had the killing of a councillor at the time by the name of Sabia. Now, it was clear from our investigation at the time that Sabia was anti-corruption and he was starting to ask questions. We had a recent killing on the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal. I don't want to go into the detail of which one because I'm actually collaborating with the police in trying to solve that particular case. There, money was allocated to build a community hall. And when a particular councillor started to ask questions about when they looked at what had been done, the progress in the project, when he started to question, but where has all the money gone, the next moment he gets assassinated. And over and above that, KwaZulu-Natal has always been known for the political intolerance amongst the opposing parties. That being said, if you look at what's happening in KZN, in my experience, invariably the perpetrators are from within the same party. So it's not necessarily opposing parties assassinating political opponents. It's within the parties where they, the moment you have a councillor or a person that appears to be asking questions or who appears to be anti-corruption, then something happens to him.
Mr. Booysen, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks indeed for your time and for your thoughts on some of what is going on in the KZN province, Gareth. And there you've heard it, repeating basically some of what we've heard, that the killings going on in KZN possibly are emerging from within the very same governing party, which is the ANC. But of course, we're talking to the former Hawks head here, General Booysen, in KZN, down in KZN, and we were talking to him about the alleged plots to have him killed. So that's where we're going to leave it for the moment.
At least as far as the live element is concerned, Xoli Mngambi, no doubt you're going to continue that conversation once I move away from you, and we'll get more from you on that a little bit later.